Good afternoon, everyone. I'm talking very closely into this microphone so that we get picked up outside. We're very lucky this afternoon to have, on my right, Dr. Monique Charles, who is a sociologist, an academic, and an expert on grime music. I'm going to read the title of her PhD thesis. It's called Hallowed by Grime, a musicological and sociological genealogy of grime music and its relation to Black Atlantic religious discourse. That sounds like it's going to be incredibly difficult and impenetrable. It's not, but in fact, by far the opposite. It's a piece of academic writing that I've read, which is full of amazing explanatory illustrations and is really quite gripping. And she's certainly the first academic that I've come across who's actually got a merch area on her website as well, which is absolutely fantastic. But enough about that. I'm going to hand you over now to Dr. Monique Charles. But before that, let's give her a big round of applause.
Okay, so thanks for having me. And today what I'm going to do is, was anybody here in the last session? Okay, all right, one or two. So I'm going to do a bit of blagging myself, for those of you who heard Captain blagging in the last session. I'm going to talk about my journey, my work, so you can kind of get a bit of an understanding about what it is that I do, why it's important, that sort of stuff, rather than going in-depth into some in-depth talk or paper that I have done. Also, there'll be a chance for questions and answers, so hopefully as I'm talking about the things I've done, why I've done them, it may prompt some questions from you guys at the end, all right? If you do want to follow me, that's my Insta and Twitter, so feel free. All right, so I had done a PhD on grime. Why? That's the question that I used to get. I started my PhD in 2010. Before it kind of mainstreamed, well, there were a couple of crossovers at the time, but people were asking, like, why are you doing that? Or people would think it was quite funny or a bit novel. And the reason why I did that, there's a long story, I suppose. I came up, anybody like jungle here, garage, grimy garage? I don't know. Okay, right, so I came up as a young or a teenager going into my early 20s. I liked garage, I liked jungle, I liked grimy garage. I liked other music as well, but British music, that's what I liked. And I wanted to find out about it, and there was nothing there. So that was kind of one of the threads that kind of fed into why I wanted to do this. But I enjoyed studying, so I went off to university, did my undergraduate degree, then I was doing my master's degree. And when I did my master's, I knew that I wanted to look at music because I had dabbled in a bit of singing as well. I knew I wanted to do music, and I wanted to look at race because that really interested me. So when it came to me doing my master's thesis, which is, I don't know how many of you are in your final year, it's the same thing as a dissertation, or similar to a dissertation, I knew that I wanted to look at hip-hop music. And that was in around 2007 when I was finishing up my master's thesis. And at this time, I was looking, and for hip hop, there's lots of scholarly work. Has anybody done any research into hip hop music? No? Okay, a couple, yep. Okay, all right, so there's lots of books, there's lots of academic writings on hip hop. So it was relatively easy for me to get that stuff to write my master's thesis. I was also aware at that time of politicians blaming music that was all lumped together as black music as being responsible for all the stabbings and the violence that was going on amongst young people. A bit like what they're saying about drill now. It's kind of the same horse they keep flogging every so often. Cohen calls those folk devils. I don't know how many of you guys look at youth studies or criminology, but folk devils, young people being the reason for moral decline. So drill, it's drill now, but it was grime back then. Then there was also the thing about the Illuminati. Anybody heard about the Illuminati? Yeah? No? Okay. I like interaction, guys, but it's cool. All right, so the Illuminati, they were talking about Jay-Z being involved in the Illuminati, Rihanna, all this sort of stuff was going on. So when I'd finished my master's thesis, I knew that I wanted to do further study. And I thought, well, the politicians are saying this about grime. There's all this sort of stuff about spirituality and music going on. There's nothing about British music happening. I could actually make a contribution here and start writing academic work around grime, because that was what was happening at the time. 2007, it had happened, or it started to happen. So these are some of the reasons why I decided to look at doing a PhD on grime. So, when I decided to go off and do my PhD, you have to go and do primary research. So what I did is I did some interviews, I did some observation, which meant I got to go out raving, raving in the name of research. And I developed a method to analyze music called MDA, or musicological discourse analysis, which is a bit of a tongue twister, but it's a very useful tool. Well, I would say that because I developed it, but it's a very useful tool to help people understand what music is beyond just the lyrics. Because I don't know how many of you, for your dissertations, may decide that you want to look at music, but a lot of the time, people end up only analysing the lyrics in songs and not necessarily all the sound effects or the panning and all this other fantastic stuff that happens with music. So this is what I did. And I also made a hashtag in my dissertation, or my PhD title. So at the end of Hallowed be thy grime, blah, 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 I have hashtag HBTG for Hallowed be thy grime. So this is what I did. So I interviewed people, I went raving, and I listened to lots of grime and tried to make sense of all of it. Okay, so familiar with grime? This is some of the old stuff, all right? I'll turn it down a bit so you can still hear me. All right, so what we know about grime is it is a genre of British music coming from the rough council estates of East London, or London, I should say, and it's synonymous with Black British youth. That's where it's kind of rooted, okay? It emerged in the early noughties, and it became known as the genre grime in around 2002, between 2002 and 2004. Anybody heard of More Fire Crew's Oi? Lethal Bizzle used to be a More Fire Crew. May not know, may know. It's a male-dominated genre up until today as well, and it's characterized by spitting or spraying bars. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? You know, you're rapping, very, very, well, at least back then, spraying bars, rapping quite quickly, 140 BPM, beats per minute, so it's really, really fast. It had other names, 8-bar, Esky beat, that's what Wiley says he makes Esky beat, sub-low, but it was eventually labeled grime owing to its grimy bass lines, the kind of gritty sounds, okay? A DIY genre, so, because of technological, I suppose, innovation and democratization, people could access technology much more easily and could make music themselves. Famous artists, as I'm sure some of you have heard of, Dizzy Rascal. He got his Mercury in 2003. Skepta, who's part of Boy Better Know. Stormzy, who's mainstream now. Lethal, who I've just mentioned. And the godfather of grime, Wiley, who makes Esky. Okay? All right, so I'll just turn that down. So some of the sonic characteristics, as in what it sounds like, or music in general, I should say. Trisha Rose, Black Noise. I don't know if any of you have read that. That's kind of a pioneering book in hip-hop, studying hip-hop culture. Goodman and Perkinson, they look at some of the characteristics of, I suppose, music from, if you want to call it a Black tradition or an Africanized focus. They prioritize rhythm. These types of music prioritize rhythm, polyrhythmic layering, so lots of sounds happening at the same time. They're cyclical, so they're repetitive, hence the 8-bar, the same sound cycling over and over again. Syncopation, so not always on the beat, might start feeling offbeat sometimes. Percussion, low frequencies, and orality, which is the rapping, the spraying bars, whatever, okay? So main sound signatures or main influences in grime. There are others as well. I should have put punk on there. But you have the bass, so the low frequencies, that comes from dub, from dancehall, even dubstep is kind of connected in there as well. You have the oral elements are the toasting, that's what they call it in like dancehall, ragga, reggae music, where they have a mic and they're, do you know, if I say ciphers, you guys know what I mean? When you're kind of clashing, you know, when people are MCing and clashing. So toasting is kind of like the reggae dancehall version. The dozens back in the day, your mum is so fat, that sort of thing. I know it's not appropriate, forgive me, but that's what they would say in the dozens. And obviously the rap. And then you have the electronic music influences, so jungle, which I loved growing up, drum and bass, and garage, these also, and they can be linked to house, to rave culture, to techno, all that sort of stuff as well. So all of these things helped me as I was trying to make sense of where grime fits, which was part of what my PhD was about, into trying to see where it fit, I could place grime in its musical family or in its musical family tree. And Lena's a useful person in helping you to understand how particular genres fit together as a family tree. Now, I've written a paper on that, but what I will talk about now is some of the theories or methodologies, I should say, that have come out of my work. So I have 4 at the moment. And so musicological discourse analysis, I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Sonic footprint timestamp, which is kind of connected to the musicological discourse analysis. So if you can analyze exactly what music is, you can pinpoint what that sonic footprint timestamp is for a group of people. I'll go into that in a minute. Almond-Rath theory, which is what happens with raving. I experienced that many times when I was doing my research. And then the Columbus sphere as well, which is the process of what happens when the industry gets their hands on underground music, okay? And these things that I've developed, these kind of theories and methodologies are important because if you're interested in making sense of music, if you're interested in, not that you necessarily want to intellectualize being at a festival or in a rave, but if for some reason you do, you can think about Almond-Rath theory whilst you're there. But it's a good way to kind of start to express and intellectualize or speak about things in a way that other people, you can have a discussion with people in a way that, so you both kind of understand what is going on, all right? So these are important concepts to kind of help you to articulate what it is that you might mean. And you might disagree with some of the stuff that I've written, if you ever read them, but then it gives you the impetus to start writing and contributing to developing concepts yourselves as well. Okay, so I propose that this is what music is. So there's lots of things that go into music. So if we think about how people have looked at music in an academic context before, they usually say, oh, the lyrics say this, the lyrics say that, okay? But I say it's a bit more than that. So I say that the music is a result of what is happening politically at the time. I'd say that the music is a result of the soundscapes that are happening at the time as well. So if you live somewhere where it's usually hustle and bustle and lots of noise and sounds going on all the time, it's kind of like your sonic habitat. You're used to hearing lots of noise around all the time. Anyone from a large city or a big city? Okay, I don't know the geography about around here, around this area, but I'm assuming it's a bit more quiet? Yeah? Okay, so for those of you who moved from a big city to this, I suppose, this smaller, more quiet area, was it noticeable to you? Did you think, like, at night when there was no noise, no people making noise outside? You know, so these things, where you live and grow up, these things make sonic sense to you and they become part of your sonic habitat. So when you're making music, your music kind of reflects what makes sonic sense to you. So these are one of the things. Technology also enables you to make sounds or prevents you from making sounds. So I can't remember the name of the machine, but when, I can't remember the name, no, I don't want to say the wrong machine, but when it came to making house, you could capture 10 seconds of a beat on this particular sampler. So maybe that has something to do with why house is repetitive, because if you could only capture a certain amount of sounds for a certain amount of time, you just have to loop that, which makes it repetitive in that way. So there's lots of different factors that kind of kick in. I've also got NILA, so that's narrative, insight, lyrical analysis, and SALSA is the soundscape locational, sonic locational soundscape analysis. So there's lots of things that happen here that actually make up the music. But as part of my research, I had these ideas. They kind of came from the observation, from the interviews, and from listening to lots of songs, from what they said, and also what I thought to see how they would marry together. But this is an open access paper. If you're interested, I can get you the link and you can have a nosy. It's free to access. Now, another thing that I have drawn on from my, I suppose from my observations, going out raving and all that sort of stuff, is that what happens in live performance, you might find this, anyone go to festivals or anyone gone to grime raves or dancehall raves? I see you at the back, yeah, great. All right, so one of the things that kind of happens in a live performance space, to make it sound academic, is you have the performers, the DJ, the MC, whoever's on the stage, even if you go to concerts, and then you have the crowd. And what happens is there's an exchange back and forth between the crowd and the performer. And what I propose in another paper, which is also open access that you can have a look at, is that it is necessary for this to keep going backwards and forwards, this interaction, whether it's verbal, whether it's musical, whether I say, Ollie, Ollie, Ollie. All right, so we're not going to get that moment of ecstasy because we're not kind of having that dialogue, but that dialogue is really, really crucial to making sure that there's a point where everyone goes, yeah, okay? So that is one of the things. So that is liminal energy power spiral. So it starts to spiral, and you kind of, the interaction gets more and more intense until you get to that moment where everyone is just like, yeah, they're on one, they're really enjoying it. So that is what one of my other theories, and I had to go to do lots of raves for that. So yeah, that was fun. Okay, so I've kind of explained to you what happens with the back and forth there, and this is what I propose happens in an actual rave or a live performance setting. So, I don't know, can I go over? Okay, all right. So, this part here, this circle here is the back and forth between me and you guys who are loving it, yeah? Okay, all right, so that's between the performer and the crowd, and then what happens is, so the performer's there, the crowd's there, and you've got this kind of cyclical thing going on, and then because the musicians or the performers know how to kind of control the audience, to kind of bring them up on a high and calm them down and stuff, they take them on this red line, which is the journey, and when they're in that kind of green box there, that's the moment when everyone's like, yeah, screaming. So this is what happens throughout the course of a night with the raving. Hopefully it won't ruin your experience next time you go rave and think, oh yeah, we're in that green box now. But this is one of the things that I've theorized, and this is what the Arm-and-Ra theory is, all right? So yeah, hopefully you won't be thinking, damn, I wish I never knew that now. Okay, another theory that I came up with, or a concept, is the Columbus sphere. And this is where we talk about the role of industry in extracting subcultural practice. So it looks very much like a fetus there, in a uterus there. And one thing I say about culture is it's got an intangible side and a tangible side. So it's got a physical side that has manifested, but it's also got a non-physical side. So that's all the knowledge, all the things you know about your culture, or a culture or a scene. And then what happens is the industry come along and they extract bits of it, but they always get it wrong. But in that process, that could be quite dangerous to the actual subcultural practice. So in many respects, that scene, that subcultural practice is like a delicate baby. It's a balance of those things. And the Columbus sphere can be quite dangerous as it extracts bits that it can just for economic gain. All right? So, when I've studied in different subjects. So I'm into what is known as interdisciplinary. So I came up, my undergrad was psychology, my master's was race and ethnic relations, but they've changed the name because it looked at gender and class as well. And then my PhD was sociology. So I'm the sort of person that if I like something, I'll just go with it. And if I think about something, I like to think about it from different angles. So when I approached Grime, I was thinking about Grime in terms of politics, how the politicians were saying things, but also how Grime itself, how it made itself, was a kind of political subversive act. I looked at it as citizenship, how people that are marginalized or kind of excluded from mainstream society used Grime to articulate their citizenship and perform their citizenship. So if you think about some of the early Dizzy Rascal videos, he had like the Union Jack, I think it was the Union Jack jacket, or he had the black cab, and you know, lots of icons to kind of connote the Britishness. Issues around gender, women not necessarily having much space there. I suppose I could even incorporate sexuality in there as well. There's not much space there. Spirituality, because I wanted to rave. Obviously the music, society, things, I suppose it kind of still connects back to politics. The impact of ASBOs, the impact of raising tuition fees, all these impacts on people that were kind of growing up under what I call Generation Grime. Issues of race as well. If you think about 696, shutting down events, stopping particular events from happening, and technology enabling a scene to spread globally, even though I suppose the authorities are pressing down on it. So these are some of the topics. So I didn't necessarily look at Grime from one angle because I like to do lots of different things. Okay, so now, this was an article I wrote for The Conversation in June 2017, just after the general election. I found it quite interesting seeing the mainstream's response at, oh my gosh, why are all these young people behind Corbyn, like it took them by surprise. But to me, as somebody who started my PhD in 2010, I realized, you know, a marginalized group of young people have managed to make a scene for themselves using technology and the resources they have available, where despite youth centers being closed down, despite, you know, the tuition fees being raised again, because I think it was 3,000, then it moved up to 9,000. So there were lots of things kind of happening, bedroom tax, taking away of EMAs. I don't know, did any of you have EMA? Get paid to go to college, a little bit of change to go to college? They probably took it away before you guys came along. But yeah, so there were lots of things that were happening socially and politically to a young group of people. And so if I think about Grime, let's just pretend it started in 2000. 2017, most people that were kind of born maybe just before, let's say 1995, they were actually old enough to vote. So they were the first set of people that were able to vote after a time where they had seen lots of things being stripped away, or maybe seen their mum struggling or taking an additional job, or, you know, just general pressures of housing and things like that. So to me, it made sense that young people would definitely come out and vote for Corbyn, looking at all of the social issues and the political issues that had taken place. So when I wrote that, that was one of the things. So I want to make sure that the work that I produce, yes, I tick the academic box and that's great, but I also like to do things like this that are a bit more easily accessible, so that they can go they can go further afield. And this one went viral, so I was quite happy about that. Like I said, I spoke about gender as well. So this was in the Voice newspaper, and I spoke about you know, women in grime, their role in grime, and how this is one of the few genres to date where women can present themselves in different kinds of ways. So if we think about hip hop, or if you think about even, I suppose, commercial mainstream, a lot of the women have to be glamorous and look in a particular kind of way. But in grime, women can be glamorous if they want to be glamorous, but then they can be androgynous, they can be tomboyish, they have the freedom and flexibility to do that. So this isn't necessarily things that people may think about in a conscious sense, but as a sociologist, these are the sort of things I think about and write about, and hopefully people think, oh yeah, actually, and it might make people think differently about things that they come across every day. Okay, so some of the interesting findings I found in my PhD research. The debate about the origins continues. Anyone from East London here? Oh, okay, all right, so I may have made an enemy. But from my research, South London always want to stand up and say, no, So Solid they didn't make grime, but they were the ones that made the shift. So there's this East London, South London thing going on. But from some of the people I interviewed, they spoke about you know, having cousins in different parts of London. And so even if it was happening over there, over here, we still heard it, we still grew up with it as well. So they feel it's very much a London thing. Interestingly, grime came up alongside the internet, or just before the internet. So it gave it the opportunity to go global and to do things outside of what the authorities were trying to shut down, what they were trying to shut down. So initially, if you couldn't put on a rave in London, which 696 kind of prevented raves happening in London, people moved outside. And then people would upload things onto the internet. Eventually, once the internet got up and running, people would get booked off things like MySpace. Anyone familiar with MySpace? Yeah. Okay. So, you know, the internet kind of helped international exposure of work opportunities and of the works that people had produced already. Pioneers had used analog tech. So what people often talk about is music was made on a PlayStation. Dizzy Rascal is obviously a very famous example of this, and that is true. However, those people that I interviewed, they knew somebody or had contacts with somebody that may have had access to a studio, or may have had access to, you know, gone to a pirate radio station. So we have online web radio stations now, but, you know, have access to analog technology in order to kind of distribute music or make music. And to, like I said before, Form 696 was something invented by the Met Police, who shut down events in London. So the shutting down, or the trying to stifle the events, and the internet in conjunction kind of helped this kind of global spread of grime. Okay, so I think I have spoken enough, and I'll leave it for questions. So thank you.
Right.
You sitting here?
think we're going to sit over here and take questions from the audience. And just before we take your questions, I just wanted to ask a little bit about 696. It's for those of us who don't know about Form 696.
Yep.
Do you need this microphone?
No, I'm still mic'd up.
Okay.
Okay, so Form 696. I was mic'd up. All right, so Form 696 was a risk assessment form that was introduced by the Met Police, and it was used particularly for clubs and live performance events, if you want to sound academic. And the first version of the form asked for the ethnic background of the performers and also the attendees. So if it was considered largely African Caribbean or largely Asian, but predominantly African Caribbean, then an event would be shut down because it would be considered high risk. So there was a lot of grassroots campaigning about this, and then after such time, they revised the form, and then the form asked what types of music would be at these events, these live performance events. And high-risk events were considered those where the performer would have a mic over a backing track, which isn't quite Pavarotti, so it still narrows it down to the same people that were being targeted. So yeah, that's it.
And it's no longer in operation, 696, but is there still a spirit of 696 going on?
Yeah. So 696 was scrapped last year. I attended a couple of meetings in a working group to get it scrapped, which is good. But yes, they still have it still has a legacy. But it also had I was going to say pregacy, a pre-legacy.
It's another neologism.
Yes,
we got
there we go. Yeah, well, there you go. So, yeah, but the policing of black music and club culture is decades old. And so it fed into shebeens, which is an Irish word, in-house illegal blues parties, that sort of thing that would happen, obviously, 50s, 60s, that sort of thing, because black people weren't allowed to have space to do these sorts of things. And alongside 696, or maybe just before 696, the Labour government were talking about the nighttime economy. We want to have a coffee or cafe culture like Europe and all this sort of stuff. So they wanted to encourage the nighttime economy, providing you weren't those people. So, there is a very concerted effort to kind of monitor particular people or genres of music. So yeah, it's part of a 696 is let's say a snippet in a long legacy of policing of.
Because it appears that now drill music is that sort of is the scapegoat. And
yes.
There was a couple of artists. I have to confess, I've never heard their stuff. Who got they had a kind of ban on performing a specific song, and then performed it at Coco in Camden, and received a criminal sentence after that.
Yeah.
Is that Skenga, is it?
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure. I think his name's Skenga. Because I must say, whenever I talk about drill, I move from my knowledge base in grime to slightly more opinion based, and I have no problem admitting that. So yeah, I'm not sure.
I was going to ask you, are you fond of drill? Do you like drill?
I think there's only so much splash, splash, wet, wet that I can actually deal with.
Okay, I don't get that reference at all. Probably people in the audience do. You want to explain that?
Do you guys? So some of the lyrics can be quite graphic. I mean, I don't even like horror movies, to be fair, but some of the lyrics can be quite graphic about stabbings and things like that. And so yeah, I don't really listen to much. So yeah, I don't listen to much. But my concern, and I mean, I did sign an open letter about the criminalisation of drill musicians, because whilst there has been an element of reality rap, as I would call it, from around let's say 2008, 2009, road rap, trap, and all that, there is an element of that there. Not every drill artist, not every trap artist is actually doing the things that they say, and in the same way you can play Grand Theft Auto, in the same way you can watch Scarface and that can be your favourite movie, Or
Scandinavian death metal.
Yes, exactly.
They're not all kind of eating corpses.
Right, exactly. So I take issue with the kind of criminalization of creative license. Yeah, I think that's
good point. Questions? Do we have some questions? Tim?
Thank you. I mean, that was really fascinating, and in one sense, my question isn't fully formulated, but it's kind of around the idea of narrating history and ownership of history. And obviously, in one sense, one question is, do you think grime has been more successful in that, in comparison to other musics, and especially in this comparison to this thing, the Columbus sphere, which sounds like fascinating. In some ways, has it been less exposed or less kind of a party to that kind of a effect? But I'm also just starting to kind of think about the idea about how people describe or experience music differently. So I'm just wondering, as primarily maybe, and I might be jumping the gun, but as a sociologist, so somebody who experiences the rave, is in the rave, how that might inform your research as opposed to maybe the production and the distribution and the making of. I mean, I've come across it, a lot of, kind of grew up around the birth of grime and saw a lot of the kind of the ways that it was being created. And I never see that largely described. So a lot of grime owes itself to simply a sound card that was in PCs at youth centres that had really basic sounds, and that was like, hey presto, there's the sound palette of grime. And so a lot of those kind of tools that really actually shaped the music and kind of then gave it an ownership. But yeah, I suppose it's just back to this question about how history is narrated and where ownership comes into it, and what that means as discourse now, really, in terms of, how we describe all these things, and how we can continue to kind of document things as broadly as possible. That's a very long, rambling question, sorry.
Okay. All right. I think the thing about grime, and I've always said this, is grime will do whatever it wants to do. Or should I say, it will do whatever it wants to do, and it will find a way to do it. I think coming from a marginalized position and managing to make something with whatever resources it had available to it, I'm talking about it in a unit for some reason, but anyway, it will find a way. I think as technology becomes more and more democratized, and it's, people can make a track on their phone, people can, upload something and it can go viral. I think the ability to kind of create I suppose, an authoritative narrative will become increasingly difficult. In 2009, 10, you had a lot of the grime artists crossing over, or grime artists and kind of connected genres or crossing over. So you had, I think it was Tinchy Strider did his #1 with Dappy. You had, although Wretch isn't necessarily grime, he had his Tractor, I think that was 2010, 11, Tiny Temper. So they started to kind of cross over. And then, especially the way that grime is, it's kind of DIY. Once the crossover started to happen, people in Birmingham were like, what are you doing? So that they can check each other as well through the same technology. And because they'd already, and at that time they may have thought the record label doing it that way, the mainstream way, was the way to go. But a lot of them, many of them wanted to get out of their record label. So Chip famously wanted to get out of his record label. And they've built those entrepreneurial skills themselves before the industry was showing any interest. So they know that those resources are there. So now they can I just feel like they can kind of do things as they wish. When it comes to, I suppose, the documentation and the narrative, when I have gone and done talks, even, 2016, when I say, I approach it sociologically, the audience would laugh because they just didn't actually get it. But I think after some of the people I interviewed and explaining to them the importance of what it is and how this music and let's just say the arrival of bass and exploration on this kind of bass timbre, that's kind of the thing now, has shaped British music. I think some of them actually thought, and I said, you need to document the culture. So I'm seeing a lot of that kind of talk happening on social media. We need to document the culture, we need to document the culture. I think they are more kind of switched on to that. Maybe not, part of it is about ownership for the scene themselves, but part of it is about the money, because it's the entrepreneurial spirit. So, if I can make a documentary, if I can write a book, if I can do something to make money as well, because that's part of I suppose, the ideology, the outlook of what grime is. I think technology and the entrepreneurial skills will help those central to the scene to have more autonomy over it. That's my longer version to answer your question.
That's a good answer. Other questions?
Thanks. First of all, I loved your talk, and I loved some of the models that you had on the screen. I want to find out more about, because I think, as well as what you're doing with grime, some of those ideas can be applied to all sorts of musical subcultures, and so I'd like to know more. I guess my question is a little bit of a follow-on from that, relating to the Columbus sphere, and just a question about, do you think there are ways that musicians and the communities within a subculture can kind of protect the baby to some extent? What are the ways that we stop the baby being exploited by the mainstream, I guess, or being poisoned by the mainstream's processes and things?
I don't have an answer to that. And the reason why I don't have an answer to that is because over time, things amass a certain amount of power and autonomy. So the industry is it's a machine at the end of the day. So I think it may always happen, but it's just about different tactics. And if you can use the entrepreneurial skills, if you can use the technology that enables you to have a certain degree of autonomy, you can do more things for yourself. So if I think about JME, like he had his own sim, he's got his own merch line, hence the merch line here. Skepta's album is on his own label, so that they're trying to find ways to kind of claw it back. But I think the industry is such a machine that, I don't know, it takes longer for it to adapt, but I suppose, I don't know. Yeah, it's a powerful machine. I think there's a lot of, as a smaller scene, or as a collective of individuals, you do have maneuverability, but it's always about trying to outrun it, I think, maybe, because the machine it's bigger, it's slower, so you have to do what you can whilst you can.
There's so many questions that, I'd just like to ask a quick additional question to that, to the Columbus sphere question, is the illustrations in your papers, which you do yourself, it's quite unusual. It's fascinating that you've got a number of different methodological ways of approaching your areas, and lots of them come with attendant illustrations. I just wanted to kind of explore that a little bit as you're sort of taking a sidestep away from grime momentarily, just looking at your kind of the way that you approach your academic practice in that way. Okay,
well, I do think that I can be out of the box. Academia is lots of writing, lots of blah, 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 lots of posh words and all that sort of stuff. And that's great, but I want people to read my work. I want people to engage with it. And also, I'm a thinker that I find if I can see it, then I can explain it better. And I'm assuming if you can see it and see what I'm explaining, then you can understand it and follow it better. So there's piles of paper of the not quite right images scrunched up all over the place. But I always try to see if I can draw it, then I can make sense of it. And also, I like ideas. I like good ideas. I like to get disparate ideas and see how they work together. I like thought experiments. And so I can think about something. I think, yeah, but how could that connect to that? How do those things marry together? So I just like to kind of play with seeing if I can make a thought visual so that it's easy to digest, and also okay, this is happening here, but what does that mean for over here? I don't know, I'm just kind of a bit like that.
And the Columbus sphere is named so because of Christopher Columbus?
Yes,
And
because he discovered things that were already happening. So, you know, so the industry discovered things that are already happening, and then they produce new knowledge, which is slightly incorrect. So it's the Columbus sphere, this kind of special place of incorrect knowledge that's promoted as the authentic thing.
Excellent.
Hopefully I'm not in there, but I'm trying to do the best I can.
questions? Bo at the back.
Don't be shy, don't be shy.
So do you, does this mic work? Yeah. Do you see any relation between the emerge of rock music and the emerge of grime?
I haven't looked much into rock music, but from what I recall reading around it, I think, when I think of both of them, it's about ways of articulating masculinities. I think they both have a cathartic element, the kind of, you know, that release. Do you mean like rock and roll or like air guitar? So, I'm not sure. I would have to look at rock. And what I would use to help me look at rock is that same what is music diagram that I have there, so I can think about where it started, what the soundscape might have been like, what was going on politically, so to see how that manifests in the lyrics, how it manifests in the sounds and the instrument choices, the technology that was available for people to articulate what was kind of going on sonically and lyrically. So I don't know, are you interested in rock music? Oh, okay. All right. Because I was going to say, you might be able to kind of, that might be a tool to help you, because like you were saying, the things that I've developed, I'm hoping people can see, oh, I wonder if this applies to punk. I wonder if this applies to rock. I wonder if this applies to your festivals even. You know, that's what I want people to kind of think about.
We got 3 more minutes, approximately. Okay. I have one last question, actually.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think, is grime exclusively a black music?
No.
I was going to say, because
Yeah.
I thought it was quite racially mixed, would you say, in East London?
Yeah, it is. One thing that I, again, in the What is Music kind of diagram paper that I talk about there, so when I talk about music, music is how it sounds and the norms of the sounds, and it's also the people. So if we think about, Rose talks about this, and maybe I didn't articulate it very clearly, but Rose talks about it, Gilroy talks about it, there are other academics that talk about it as well. So if we think about the European music tradition, at least the highbrow European music tradition, operatic music is not cyclical, so you're not going to get like, you know, the same like 4 beats in a bar, you know, the sound repeating. It's going to be a long kind of melody that has got all harmony and kind of goes off, and you know, you sit down and you're not going to find the conductor saying "Oli, oli, oli." You know, there's not going to be that kind of participation.
Although that would be great.
It would be great, actually. Maybe we can make a kind of grime hip hopper or something. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So there's certain things in the European music tradition. It's more spectacle. So it's not as participatory. It's not necessarily as cyclical. You're not necessarily going to dance. It's not cyclical in the way that you can kind of dance and engage in the same way. So how it sounds, the fact that it's cyclical, the fact that it prioritizes the bass, the fact that it prioritizes, I suppose, the spoken word, these things are attributed more to kind of Afro-diasporic musical practices. So when I talk about black musics, I'm talking about the traditions that it comes from. So just to make that distinction. So it's not saying white people can't enjoy, Asian people can't. It's not saying that at all. And obviously people that are engaged in making the music come from all backgrounds, but it's that musical tradition. In the same way, if we decided to become an opera band, it's not going to take it away from being, you know, a European music tradition. So that's the distinction. Does that help?
Gotcha.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely. I think we've run out of time, so let's have a big round of applause for Dr. Monique Charles.